going to press on and introduce Joe. Thank you, Joe, for being our ambassador and champion for the Academy. And the context for today, whilst it focuses on AHPs, it's the first workforce priority group. There will be others to come, but this was the first system-aligned workforce group that we were tasked to sort of promote. So if I can just hand over to you, just to warmly welcome, and then we'll take the presentations.
So thank you, Ali. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. Good morning to you. For those that don't know me, as Ali has said, I'm Joe Fielder, Chair at NELF, North East London Foundation Trust. And I guess my affinity with the Academy and the concept of an Academy goes back at least 6 years to when I was just becoming Chair at NELF. And then during that last 6 years, I was also for 3 years Chair of BHR and wanted to sponsor and promote the Academy because I believe it can bring a huge amount of benefit, not only to us as providers and us as a health system where we're working with colleagues in social care and the third sector to really address our workforce issues, but equally to really provide sustainable career opportunities in many areas for our young people in our communities. And all of that's purpose is focused towards better health and well-being for our residents, our communities, our places, and our system. And that means better outcomes in terms of recovery, but also better outcomes, I hope, in the longer term around what we do in prevention. So I'm a long-term sponsor, I hope, and champion of the Academy. And, you know, I do believe that the work that's been done, particularly in recent times with Ali leading for us, has really well where the short, medium and long-term gaps are in our workforce. We know we've got workforce pressures, and we know the pandemic has really added that pressure and that challenge. And we know that our workforce and the colleagues working in social care and healthcare are very fatigued at this time. So attending to our workforce needs in the short, medium and long term is vital. And the analysis tools and the data that you're all kindly providing into it is essential for us to fill the gaps and understand where the priorities and the needs really are. And as Ali's already indicated in her introduction, we know already that by really doing some work to facilitate and broker greater coverage in the AHPs, we can start to infill and relieve some of those pressures and plan for a sustainable workforce that gives opportunities to our young people in particular in our communities and leads to better health and well-being outcomes for our communities, residents and citizens. So I absolutely commend it. I'm delighted that the event today is so well supported. Thank you for giving up time to it. And without further ado, I'm going to pass back to you, Ali, and be very interested and active participant for the first hour. So back to you, Ali. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So we have an action-packed agenda. I'm not going to walk you through the agenda. Iterations have been sent out. The speakers will give you the full details on all of the content. I just wanted to share with you our shared purpose today. We have a clear shared purpose to work together as a system using a data-led approach and to agree our shared priorities. The system will be responsible for delivery. The Academy can't do everything. There's a very tiny team, as many of you know. And our aim is to achieve, using anchor organisational principles, the ambition, as Joe alludes to, in order to grow our own, but it needs to be a sustainable, agile and flexible workforce for the future. Our collective objectives today is to align system-wide AHP workforce priorities. We need to be answering the so what, because the data that we'll get today won't tell us anything we don't know. It's what are we going to do as a system to do about it, and how can that help with strengthening workforce planning, improving our education and training pathways, providing careers for young people, and improving the health and wellbeing outcomes of our local residents in our communities in outer London. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Stephen Sandford, who I'm delighted has joined us today as the chair of the AHP Council, and he's going to give us an introduction to a NEL regional view for AHPs. Stephen.
Thank you, Alison. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and thank you, Joe, for your endorsement of a multi-professional collective leadership approach to workforce development. And it's really exciting to see the innovation that's happening in this part of Northeast London, which hopefully will pave the way for migration to other places. I know in the audience today we've got lots of chief AHPs from across London and beyond, and lots of AHPs who are doing that really important work, on the ground. So hopefully this session will be really relevant to everyone's benefit. Next slide, please. So the starter for 10 question that Suzanne Rastracht, who's the chief AHP for England, asks people when she's on a dinner party is, who are the AHPs? Can you write down on your napkin now who they all are? And that's the quiz that we could do right now. But just to remind you, on front of you are the 14 allied health professions. And they represent breadth and depth across, I would argue, all health and social care pathways in Northeast London. Not least the really significant contribution AHPs have made to new care pathway development more recently through the pandemic, including our response to COVID rehabilitation. And the next slide, please, really is a thank you to all the AHPs across Northeast London on behalf of the AHP Council for all of your amazing work through the pandemic and your integral contribution. And it was tremendous to celebrate that recently on Allied Health Professionals Day in October. But this event, along with the leadership of the Academy and BHR, really paves the way for actually visibility and focus around our AHP professionals, who often perhaps get a little hidden away with the narrative in the NHS, which does focus readily so and rightly so on doctors and nurses. But I think in an evolving landscape, like I've mentioned, we need to think more broadly about actually how, with population health, our AHPs are integral to all our solutions to supporting our communities and our residents. Next slide, please. So the time is now right. Why is that the case? Well, the time is now right because AHPs across Northeast London have got organised. And they have got organised because our senior leaders in the integrated care system have opened consistently doors to welcome us in and say, we want to listen to you, we want to hear what's going on, we want your value to contribute to our solutions to Northeast London and the health and care of our local residences. And I can see right in front of me Rachel Roberts, one of our senior GP leads, smiling now, who is one of those ambassadors for AHPs, and there are many others who have really endorsed that multi-professional collective leadership support. So I think next slide, please. With that, we have an AHP Council that has a shared purpose, which brings together AHP leaders from across all of our NHS providers and evolving leadership from our social care AHP colleagues to really provide collective strategic leadership and advice to the range of the ICS forums, including workforce, which we're here to focus on today, and care pathway development. Next slide, please, Alison. Alongside that, the organisation of AHPs across Northeast London really prompts the need, like I've said, for workforce development. And I'm delighted that we have a very active, dynamic AHP faculty endorsed by NHS England and Improvement and Health Education England, led very capably by the Group Director of AHPs at Barts Health, Rachel Dalton, which is focusing on how we really build the supply, capacity and development of our AHP workforce across Northeast London to create clear care pathways, career pathways, like Joe has mentioned, for staff and opportunities for the people of Northeast London to optimise our clinical services. So essentially what I'm saying is we are really now in a brilliant place to think about the innovation that comes from different parts of Northeast London, particularly today, the excitement of the BHR Academy and what it's leading in relation to workforce development on our behalf. Next slide, please, Alison. Just to give you a flavour, Alison, just click through these, please. This is an overview of where AHPs are now cited, and that reflects the open door perspective that I mentioned of our ICS leadership. So we now sit on all of these areas and these spaces with a voice at the table. And that's a real endorsement of the North East London approach, which is collective and inclusive. And it certainly chimes with the values that I try to live in my day job through ELFT, which is we care, we respect, we're inclusive. Next slide, please. So why are our eyes on the BHR Academy as an AHP council, and why should we all be cited on this area of innovation? These are the big headlines, which are the challenges. Gareth Noble, a great friend of AHP's too, reminded me recently that our population in North East London will grow to a similar level that equates to the total population of the city of Sunderland very soon. That's, I think, a tremendous increase of local families growing up in North East London with health and care needs. We have massive workforce challenges across health and social care services, and we need to do things differently. Demand will outstrip our resources and our capacity. We need to shift our expectations of entrance to the workforce. So as a generation way back person who's lived and worked in the NHS now for 25 years, I am so out of date with what young people really want and what they need in relation to their values and what work means to them. So we need to really listen to our young people and actually think about what Generation Z really value in relation to work for the future and what work means in relation to their values and their aspirations. And vacancies really link to the need for focusing on what really matters. Next slide, please, Alison. So what does really matter? Well, I was reminded through looking at some of the quality improvement work at ELF that without data, we're only just another person with an opinion. And I think that's why today is really lucrative for all of us, because actually the workforce modelling tool from BHR takes that to a whole new level. A rocket has been launched that really is very exciting, and the energy that it's taken to launch that rocket is really significant in relation to actually how it leads the way for innovation and cross-system data that actually is what we all really need now. And we live with the legacy of the electronic staff record, the ESR record. We all have invested tremendously in building data that points to which really influences our knowledge base for workforce. And so that's why today I think is a real eye-opener for all of us in relation to actually this opportunity. Beyond data, next slide, please, Alison. I hope the sound will share, Alison. I'm sure you've got it covered. But beyond data, there is the story and the narrative that comes from young people and our staff. And I'd like to leave you with a 1-minute, 49-second video, which will share a little glimpse of the tremendous work of our AHP BAME ambassadors in North East London, who now number 40 in total, all from ethnically diverse backgrounds, who are all shaping at a population, community, neighbourhood level, the narrative for why AHP careers matter. And this short video will give you a little glimpse of their energy and our approach and our creative endeavours to really making AHP careers alive and an exciting opportunity for young people in North East London, as Joe has mentioned. Thank you, Alison.
Oh, sorry. I have to stop the video first. Thank you so much, Stephen. That's a really inspiring and really empowering backdrop to why we're here collectively in the room today. Thank you so much. I'm now going to move us on. So from a strategic now position, we're going to bring this back to BHR, and I'd like to welcome Wellington McCalla, our Executive Director of AHPs and Psychological Professions at NELFT, and ask him just to contribute in terms of our needs and priorities for AHP for a future workforce. So welcome, Wellington. You are on mute, so just to allude.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Ali, and thank you, Joe, for setting the scene, and thank you, Stephen, for really what your presentation, really awesome. Feeling very energized. I thought Ali was my friend until she has put me to speak after you, which is not really nice. It's not fair. I should have just found my way somewhere in the middle. I really, I think, really quite excited. I think I'm just really excited about what we are talking about. Actually, that the rocket has been launched, and we are really connected in that space. Actually, where we've launched this rocket. I think I speak to colleagues and I say I'm a living testimony on what is possible in the BHR economy. Where you can start from being a student. So as a student nurse, I studied at Harold Hood University South Bank, and I've worked through the system from a student nurse in NELF to become an executive director for AHP and psychological profession in the same organization. So really, I think when Joe kind of like really talks about growing our own, I think really that really resonates for me. It's really quite strongly about what is possible. And I think really what we are doing today and what we've done through the BHR Health Academy is to promote what is possible. And I think that's really what AHP really stands for. Actually, we really push the boundaries. So really just being clear about the priorities, really that AHP for us as BHR Academy is our top priority. That actually really coming through here to say actually it is really our top priority where we need to get it right. And the conversation really which we're having is that actually it shouldn't be that you need to move out of now, that you need to move out of BHR. We should have enough within BHR economy that someone can start from school to decide to become an AHP, to really live their whole career within the organization, within the system. And if they wanted to be an exec, that they can be an exec. If they want whatever they want to do, they can still do it within the economy. So that's really why growing our own is very important, because really we're going to starting to look at. So if you look at actually the areas we serve, you are looking at Buckingham, Dagenham, Havering, Redbridge. You look at actually how diverse that population is. But actually even within our own organization in NELFT, when I look at our AHP workforce, I think it's probably one of the ones actually where diversity is not really leaning itself very well around that space. So there is something I think around as part of our priority and our commitment about actually how do we only just develop our AHP workforce, but how do we also look at actually a workforce of AHP which also represent the population which we are serving, about actually how do we really push into some of those BME communities to get people excited about actually coming into AHP, to make sure that there's more diversity in that space. And I think that will really be a very good place to be. My last point, I think, is just really, I think, again, talking about actually the value of AHP supporting the out of hospital pathway, supporting the flow. That like if we get it right around the AHP workforce, which is why it is really a top priority, we get it right, we can then start to talk about actually how do we then start delivering care in the place? How do we deliver care in people's homes? Because we need to get this workforce right, because actually flow and a lot of our pathways, flow really depends on actually our strength around our AHP workforce. So really without wasting other people's time, I think really on the why and why about the now is really as we respond to the pressures of COVID, as we respond to the pressures which has come through around winter, which we're coming through, and like starting to think about the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years within BHR economy, it is a top priority for us to get it right around the HP workforce. So with that, I would just really end and I'll hand over back to Ali. Thank you very much for everything you're doing around it. I think we are on mute now, Ali. It's a reverse.
Apologies, I'm mirroring you now. Just to say thank you for your warm intro and such a great champion, not only for AHPs, but also for our local communities in aspiring to be in any leadership role that they choose to be. You're a shining light in terms of our opportunities for young people to get a career in health or social care from a BME or another ethnic background. So thank you so much for that. Chris Tuckett is now going to join us and give us a flavour from a live AHP perspective. He's our Associate Director for AHPs, and he'll probably give us a real granular detail of what the flow and what the issues are and challenges for AHPs to rise to. So Chris, thank you.
Thank you, Ali, and hello everyone. Yeah, I think this is a really exciting time, I think, and I think just having that BHR Health and Care Academy kind of platform and the branding, I think those things really matter. It gives it a real fresh perspective, and I think it's something which we can really kind of utilise and take forward. In terms of the challenges, I don't think there's anything that's unfamiliar to people on this call, but if we're looking at kind of the recruitment issues, the retention issues, obviously the use of agency, our staff wellbeing, particularly over the last few months, obviously kind of the workforce to patient ratios, and just generally the capacity of our staff. I think they're all the challenges that we're all so familiar with. But obviously we want to look at the opportunities as well that are hopefully going to come and really be facilitated through the BHR Health and Care Academy. And I think the diversity issue has been touched upon the previous two speakers, but I think it is such a crucial issue for us in the allied health professions. And I think sometimes we perhaps neglect to set out why it's such an important issue. I think obviously it is the right thing to do, and that is a critical aspect of it. But I think we have to also acknowledge that it makes us all better if we address that particular issue. It makes us stronger as a profession, but it makes us stronger as organisations. It's not just about the diversity of the workforce being representative, but that diversity of the workforce enables us to think better. It enables us to be more innovative. It just enables us to deliver better solutions. And there's huge amounts of evidence out there as well that, the people from different backgrounds, that diverse population that we want to engage with, they're much more likely to engage with us if, the workforce that are going to represent us is representative of that population. So there's a whole host of very concrete and evidence-based reasons why it's important that we really achieve those diversity goals. I think also that having a platform like the BHR Health and Care Academy, it is important to give us that platform for allied health professionals to see visible AHP leadership working across and at system level. I think often allied health professional leadership can sometimes seem to be a bit out of the viewpoint of some of those AHPs at the front line. I think it's really important that we're able to demonstrate that AHPs are at the table in terms of those leadership discussions, those strategic discussions, and the BHR Health and Care Academy will give us that. I think that is also important from a career modelling point of view. We want our allied health professionals who are perhaps working at the front line, if you like, to see that there are career avenues into leadership positions and how that as a career develops and there's opportunities to really have that impact at system level. I think there's huge amounts of opportunity to eliminate any competition and also to really work together in terms of delivering student placements, working to really deliver that enhanced kind of clinical supervision aspect, which is so important for our allied health professionals, and making sure that we're really able to deliver innovative models around perhaps rotations for staff in different staff groups, and really take advantage of the different specialties that a lot of the organisations will provide that others may not do so. So there's other opportunities around perhaps primary care and seeing if we can really align the offer that we can make to our primary care colleagues so that they see the allied health professions as a real long-term solution to some of the problems that they're also facing in terms of the huge amounts of demand that they've been tasked with delivering and have delivered over the last 18 months or so. So there's huge opportunities there as well. And I think the dashboard is that hopeful, repository for us to really align our data and really make sure that we align our outcomes from that data. And so making sure that we're all pooling from that same data pool will be critical going forward. And I think in terms of the anchor institution status, particularly for allied health professionals, there's a huge body of work now which shows that AHPs are really well positioned to address and deliver on the health inequalities that we'll see across our system. And so I think that anchor institution status can really be enhanced the more we position AHPs at the forefront of that. And obviously that's going to be to the benefit of the population we're looking to serve. So I think the BHR Health and Care Academy is a platform that we can use, really capitalise on and hopefully deliver on behalf of the populations we serve. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you so much. And I think what's really important here is just to, we've heard a lot of sort of NHS content. We're alluding very much to the work that's collaboratively the viewpoint of the benefits for our local communities. But our next session really lands the how it feels outside of hospital. And so I'm going to introduce a case study now, which will really explain from a passionate perspective of some of the real pressure points from our care, social care, and from our primary care partners. So we're going to talk to a live case study that's going to be presented with Elaine Allegretti, who's our Director of Adult Social Services from London Borough of Barking and Dagenham, and she's going to do a bit of a multitasking presentation with support from Emily Plain and Paul Allerton in terms of the Training Hub and CCG to walk us through the journey of what's happened so far, because AHP hasn't just arrived since the launch of the Academy. There's been a lot of background work that has escalated the need to a partnership board level and really support the flow and the pipeline analysis for our care partners and our primary care partners. So Elaine, hopefully you're with us. If I can just introduce you to lead us on this important case study.
Thanks, Ali. No, I'm here. And it would be really impressive if I was a Director of Adult Social Services and could talk in all this detail about children's, but I'm also a Director of Children's Services as well. I currently am the Strategic Director, actually, for Children, in all seriousness, Children's and Adult Services in the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham. And in that capacity, I chair something called the BHR Children and Young People's Transformation Board on behalf of Redbridge, Havering and Barking and Dagenham. And yes, I'm going to do a double act with Emily and Paul. We've not practiced it, so bear with us. It might not be as slick in terms of handover. And I only just realised that, Emily, you were taking over slides for me because I was like, I can't talk to that. So that's really helpful. Before I begin, I'll try and bring this to life with passion, as you've said, Ali, around what it feels like from a systems perspective. And sort of how I've sort of ended up here today is really from reaching out to the Academy and likewise back to us within the children's area about how we can work together to really make sure that we deliver the support we need and the services we need for children and young people across this part of North East London. We don't all look the same in North East London in terms of our child population, and there's varying needs and levels and issues, and that's no different from Barking and Dagenham, Redbridge and Havering. But we do have a number of shared challenges, particularly in relation to a fast growing and increasingly young population. In my case, in Barking and Dagenham, one of the highest, a few years ago, I had the highest birth rate in Europe in Barking and Dagenham. And within that, huge rates of deprivation and poverty. Barking and Dagenham has we're one of the top poorest areas of poverty. When you look at us against the National Poverty Index, we've got one of the highest rates of deprivation, or the highest rate of deprivation and child poverty in London. And we've recently moved to the highest rate of unemployment in the country in Barking and Dagenham. And with that comes huge health inequalities and huge challenges for our children and young people to get the best start they need. And that also comes with huge passion and commitment from all of our workforces trying to do the best for our children and young people. However, I think where we got to with this sort of reaching out was that, you know, we really needed to have a shared conversation about what our challenges are, as well as our opportunities. And that's what I'd like to share with you today. And I probably wouldn't have passed that test, actually, that you put up on the napkin around what includes an allied health professional. And I think, you know, it's, you know, this work as well, I think, has really helped to shape the wider learning to, you know, people like myself that, you know, don't understand the breadth and the challenges in that workforce, and the same as you understanding and listening to us about what our daily experiences are and what we need, for, you know, from that workforce. And just to bring that to life a bit, you know, we are seeing against that backdrop of, you know, high levels of need, fast changing growth in things like special educational needs, particularly children with ASD, ADHD, and you know, a number of issues and challenges in that space around the resources we've got and how they best meet those needs. We are also seeing unprecedented rates of need on the back of COVID for all vulnerable children. And, you know, all of us are carrying increasing referrals for safeguarding. And also this is also shedding challenges on even some of the basics of any workforce about understanding risks and issues and identifying and assessing risks and issues around safety and safeguarding for our children and young people. And that means that the way we respond is having to change. So I'm not alone. Schools up and down the country and across the BHR patch, you know, mainstream schools have really high levels of needs of children with special educational needs. It's not unusual to have 30 or 40 children that meet the threshold for education health care plans, you know, with really severe levels of autism, for example, in our schools. And locally, we have something called ARPs, which are mini special schools, if you like, the simplest way of explaining it, in mainstream schools, but no special schools, nurses, nor allied health professionals in those schools. So, you know, a real everyday challenge there. Mental health, emotional well-being, huge issue, you know, for our young people. You know, young people are more aware of you know, spotting this and expressing, you know, anxiety and challenges of mental health. But again, a school nurse doesn't really do mental health, or is maybe not equipped to deal with mental health in the way that young people, or, you know, we'd like to. And lastly, another one that springs to mind is health visiting. You know, we sit here with huge caseloads. I mean, I did a piece of work many years ago on the Aylesbury estate when they set up one of the first children's centres, and caseloads then were high, 350, 400, you know, our health visitors carrying in the hundreds, much higher, almost double that now. And actually that health visitor being skilled to deal with the challenges, not only of the increasing need and complexity, but able to respond sensitively and with impact to a parent that may be suffering domestic abuse, parental mental health, or trying to cope as a parent with a newly diagnosed child with ASD and autism. So just those daily challenges. So this also sits against a backdrop of complexity of a landscape. So we have the huge changes with the integrated care system. Doesn't really mention children much, that national guidance, which we can see as an opportunity really to take hold of this agenda and shape it ourselves, as well as a long anticipated review of SEND, which I think will see schools getting greater monies and greater accountability, but also will be a key player in how we deliver health support to some of our most vulnerable children. And also things like the care review, which will shape and challenge work and how we work, particularly with our very vulnerable children, such as those that are looked after, who also require specialist health provision from allied health professionals. So we, in that spirit, had a workshop. The next slide, please. I don't know am I doing my own slides or is someone doing that for me? That's it. So we had a workshop actually that where we began to explore what this felt like for us as a system. And I think, Alison, it's fair to say that it was a pretty passionate workshop. And actually, the BHR CYP Transformation Board prides itself on its ability to have robust, sometimes difficult conversations premised on, a shared value of working together to do the best for children and young people. And actually, I think it was such a powerful workshop in that it really felt like it was one of the first times that we heard from each other's perspectives about the challenges that we were facing. And I think in some ways sort of tackled some myths of, the ways others work, and that there sort of happen to be all these resources that may not be being worked or used, to maximum. And we, the workshop, we were very lucky. We were joined by head teachers as well, and SENCOs, community health providers, as well as our staff in the hospitals as well, in acute settings. And very, very, unsurprisingly, very many of the issues that I've described to you so far came up in terms of things like SEND and health visiting, mental health. In summarising, and I think this slide does it very well, the sort of, the shared challenges, or the view of the shared challenges, the increased local population, and what that meant in terms of, growing numbers of children and young people within all of our boroughs, increased activity, and the need for more and maybe different skills mix to currently existing within AHPs. We have seen increased caseloads, as I've referred to, not only in things like health visiting, but CAMS waiting lists, tier 4 crisis, eating disorders, self-harming, the waiting lists and the issues continue to grow, as well as really, really, really shockingly high waiting lists for diagnosis for autism, which, for example, in some parts of the BHR patch is up to 3 years. So if you're thinking about a child who may not have accessed health visiting, turning up to school at 5 with very little input from health for various reasons, and then going on a waiting list and perhaps being diagnosed at 8 or 9, you can see what that means for outcomes and the challenges of how we need to work together. And even we've done some really good work through the board of agreeing how we may prioritise the limited resource we've got, for example. Staffing, inadequate staffing levels, inadequate resources, and actually pressure, a feeling of pressure across the system. And I have to say, the sort of workshop at that point felt quite depressing, actually, because ultimately what it feels like is, despite, and this workshop was testament to this, despite huge passion, huge skills, huge knowledge, and people working their absolute hardest together, we felt like that we were failing children and not being able to do our best for them. And central to that was the workforce challenges that we faced, not only in keeping the staff we've got and skilling up the staff we've got, but also how we grow the staff we need and also attract the staff we need to this area of London against, perhaps not as competitive pay rates. And actually, you know, when you do turn up here, it's, you know, it's not always easy. You know, your caseloads are high, you know, they're complex, and the resources are stretched. And I do put out there, and it wouldn't be me if I didn't say, I think what this is beginning to show as well is some of the parity issues that sit across the BHR system when it comes to resourcing of child health and other issues, and maybe some of the postcode lotteries and of accessing support. And you know, your chances aren't that high the further you get out into the outer London, northeast London boroughs on this. So after feeling slightly depressed, we then you know, used it as an opportunity to reflect on what some of the solutions are and could be. If you could move to the next slide, please, so that we can cheer people up. So it certainly felt like there were a lot of opportunities and quick wins. And I think the challenge here for us is that the needs are now, and they're pretty pressing. And it's about how we affect the service improvement and sort of short-term needs, you know, presented by these workforce challenges, as well as thinking about innovation and longer-term solutions. You know, we've got to make what we've got work better. But we also need to think more creatively and differently, and we're really pleased to be working with the Academy to help us do that. So clearly you wouldn't be surprised to see these things here. Training, so apprenticeships, for example, how we rotate, how we use the diversity of the full partnership landscape, placements in schools, training in schools, delivering services in schools, or the voluntary and community sector, for example. And we do know from when we do this that, you know, allied health professionals, you know, enjoy being in schools around children rather than in clinics or in hospital settings. So, you know, some real opportunities there. Thinking about our recruitment and retention, you know, what could we offer within our current system that, you know, attracts people or helps people stay? What are some of those in-kind things, you know, compassionate leadership that promotes and supports diversity and is inclusive? You know, some of those qualities that aren't necessarily just caught up in how much we can pay people. You know, what's our shared leadership narrative to attract and keep staff, and what we can commit to staff as a system about what they can get and how they can succeed working with us, for example. I think we do recognise the challenges and some of the service gaps, and in my view, that sort of is universal to acute and everything in between. You know, we are seeing challenges, but there were some in particular that came up: sleep services, multidisciplinary teams around schools. I've just seen yesterday the obesity data that's just been published, which shows Barking and Dagenham with one of the highest obesity rates, or the highest obesity rate in London, and pretty much that's, you know, with a trajectory going that way rather than that way. You know, so diet and health and eating services, which is also a feature actually in terms of some of our special educational needs children as well. And so, you know, sort of how do we get less about the pathway and the service and more about the child and their holistic needs? And of course, better integration. And no workforce challenge would be complete without that of IT and information sharing. And also just, you know, how we get some of those processes streamlined and feel easier for people to do their day jobs. Within that, of course, a number of quick wins. But as I said, juggling those quick wins against, you know, some really systemic and, you know, longer term issues that we really, really need to address locally, and which I think if we're that easy, we would have done by now. And, you know, I think we need to be thinking of this as the system bringing the full weight of the Academy and its partners together to really begin to tackle some of this. So in terms of our next steps, next slide, please. As you can see, we've got a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy, and certainly you know, we are getting together on the 15th of December to really begin to set down what some of those solutions could be in line with some of those reflections that I just shared with you. And I think actually this is also an opportunity to shape, you know, it's a real live action learning set actually, and shape what actually the Academy can do. And, you know, and I put that challenge, Alison, you know, like to test you at your maximum about what difference you can make to this really live issue, and hopefully come up with something between us that really does set us apart, but also sets the precedent for system working around workforce. And as well as those longer term challenges, you know, that collaboration, and as I spoke about, you know, that shared culture across our workforce. And, you know, we would, you know, from my perspective, you know, how we sort of formalise that compassion, accountability, relationships, respect, you know, some of, you know, being, you know, children being safe and seen and heard as part of our work. So, you know, how we can shape some of that long-term strategy. And I'll, you know, I'm finishing up now on my slides before I hand over to Emily, but, you know, I think we want a workforce, a shared workforce that reflects and can deliver on the ambitions we have for children and young people. And actually, we are only as good as our workforce as well in lots of ways. You know, we're part of a really big team working together to do the best for children and young people. And actually, without the workforce we need, you know, we're going to be limited on how we do that. So I really welcome this work, and I'm really pleased and excited to be part of it. And, you know, thank you for inviting me today to sort of share with you the work we are doing. And I look forward to the rest of the session.
Thank you, Elaine. I'm going to interrupt your session that was to be dovetailed with Emily and Paul, just because we're really tight to time now. But thank you for that really passionate call to action. I think we have clearly heard that. It does raise the question of the so what, but I think for the audience now, it'd be really helpful to move us into the devil of the detail, which the dashboard will showcase, because we've done quite a lot of analysis to really highlight particular issues for you in the representative areas of children and young people and health visitors and school nurses. So we've listened to you, but I hope moving on, we can just move across to the live demo, and all of the content that Emily and Paul have collated in workshops that were led in May and in September are the outputs from these slides. You will get them, so the detail will still be there. So Emily and Paul, apologies, I'm going to skip across to this particular point just because of the time. So I'm now going to introduce Simon Hart, who's the accountable officer really for the dashboard development, and our team and supplier Attain, who have worked tirelessly with us since April, but largely on the improvements of a version 2 refresh, doing some detailed work to improve data and quality. So Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Ellie. So my name is Simon Hart. I'm the Director of People and Culture at NELFT. I will be mindful of time. I'll be brief in terms of my introduction, but as Stephen has already mentioned, data is great, but it's only useful when you have as complete a data picture as possible. You've pulled all the data into the right place, you've got good quality data, and then perhaps most importantly of all, because even then it's still just data, is you have a means by which you can interpret it, analyze it, and ask questions of it. And only then does it start to become the rocket fuel that Stephen was referring to in his initial presentation, that can then take us into the so what space. So the work that Martin and colleagues have done has been an immense piece of work. It has encompassed both health and local authority. It continues in terms of building a quality and detailed picture of our total workforce for for BHR in North East London, but specifically today around AHPs. And as has already been alluded to, it is not the answer to our questions that we've got, but it is the key. It is the means by which we will find some of those answers. And so I think with that, that's probably more than enough from me, and I will hand over without further ado to Martin to take us into the detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I think when we started this conversation with you, Ali, and colleagues back in February and March time, the essential challenge you set us was to build the most comprehensive and insightful workforce tool in the country. And that's what we've been seeking to do. I'm very conscious that this audience has got everybody from folks who've seen the dashboard before to folks who've never seen it. So we're going to try and ensure that we provide value to both of those groups and everybody in the middle. For the folks who've seen it before, I would say that what we're going to do now is probably show you much more of the drill down capability that the dashboard's got. We've now arrived at a position where we are in a pretty comprehensive place around information on all of the workforce in BHR, but there is still considerable work to do to complete that in respect to primary care. But to give you a sense of the scale of this, we've now got 800,000 lines of data that we're interrogating to give you what Alex will shortly demonstrate. We've completed phase 1 and are in the midst of phase 2, which is about refreshing the data, because of course, while it's important to be comprehensive, it's got to be sufficiently up to date that it's relevant. So this will be a continuing process. In phase 2 also, we've been trying to take on board the comments that people have made, having seen the dashboard, to try and improve the comparisons, try and make it as relevant as possible to everybody who wants to use it as a tool. Ali, can we pop over to the next slide? So specific to that, in the first iteration of the dashboard, we didn't have nearly enough detail on the social care workforce groups. And there's been a lot of help we've been given over the last few weeks to try and ensure that we can drill down on those workforce groups. We will never have perfect data, but what is essential is that we're continuing to get feedback to make sure that we are doing apple for apple comparisons of different roles, and that will continue. We've been asked why we need so much information from people, given that you already required to provide various data feeds to various bodies. And the answer is that for the ambition that you have in BHR, typically most of the information you provide isn't detailed enough for the purposes you want. So particularly with the strategic endeavour to try and grow your own and retain your own, things like where people live is really important and is not typically part of other data requests. As I mentioned, looking forward, we still need to do a lot to wholly engage primary care, so we've got the most comprehensive picture possible. But to circle back to what Simon was saying, is the only point in doing this is to put you in a position where you have a single version of the truth that you've got confidence in, that can take around which you can take decisions, both strategic and indeed I would say operational as well. So for example, quickly identifying where you're getting high levels of staff turnover, or where you've actually got a critical workforce group with a age range that says that a lot of people are going to be retiring soon. So those are the operational insights we can provide. But with that overview, I'm going to ask my colleague Alex to take us through some of the capability that's been built.
Thank you, Martin, for that excellent introduction. I'm just going to share my screen, and I'm going to look for a nod from Ali to make sure that A, I can be heard, and B, the screen can be seen. Brilliant, thank you. So some of you, I'm conscious, will have seen the version 1 of this, and as Martin mentioned, some of you won't have. So just to point out that in version 1, those that remember, there was a few more in the total workforce on this screen. The reason it's gone down isn't because there's less data, it's because we've had more opportunity to code it and classify it. So particularly around NELFT, where the footprint is wider than BHR, we've managed to kind of hone in on the relevant workforce and exclude some of the, particularly around Essex and Kent, to make it more relevant to BHR. So also on the front screen here, we've now looking across cross-section of the workforce, rather than looking by organisation type, we've got it by where the workforce, what sort of area they're working in. So we're able to split out adults and general, children and young people, for example. And at the touch of a button, we can click here and the headline figures adjust. And we've got these different groups here. And also just to give an example of the additional work we've done with local authorities to sort of bring it from around about 6 large sort of workforce groups. We've now got over 25 of them that are split across social work, community care, and education, which is more of the special educational needs that Redbridge in particular have helped us classify. We can drill down on each of these. So nursing and therapies, we've got the various different categories of nurses, and AHPs we can see here. In particular, again, we've got 1,281 across the whole of the workforce, children and young peoples. That's down to 236. Drilling down into there, we've got speech and language therapists. Now, just another comment here. I think on the napkin test, I don't think psychological therapists were included, but for this exercise, we have included them because they play such an important role within the mental health for children and young people. So this gives an overview, and we've got a breakdown of ethnicity as well as age and gender just on this front page. But moving on, we have some mapping functionality. Now this is dependent on the data quality as well. So this is really just a highlight, and we'll see the overall number has gone down because we haven't been able to get details of where everyone lives. But it gives an idea of who, out of those people we do have, what proportion live inside the BHR areas and who lives outside. So from this data, we can see that there's still a large proportion that live outside the BHR boroughs. And again, and as the data gets more detailed and higher data quality, we'll be able to put more of a breakdown into by role and staff group. This is a breakdown of age, ethnic group and gender across different working groups. So we can do the drill down again onto children and young people. And if we look in particular at occupational therapists, in fact, if we go back up to the whole of occupational therapy, because there's an awful lot of working in adults, we can see in this example that it looks as though there's a difficulty in retaining occupational therapists through the age groups. It drops off quite rapidly from the age of 44 onwards, which suggests that there is a retention issue. And then just to have a look also at health visitors, another key workforce group. Again, we can see, you know, the sort of traditional bias, but this is really extreme, I think, between male and female. And we could see that potentially as an opportunity to increase the workforce from the male side of things. But also here for health visitors, we can see that there is, in this case, there's more of a retirement risk. So there's a large proportion of the workforce that are getting up towards 60, and there's a heavy drop off, as you'd imagine, from people who retire. And on that theme, we have a breakdown of the split between under 55 and 55s and overs. And we can see here the workforce group in community care has a particularly high, and if we drill down into that area, we can see in social care and support, it gets even worse when we're looking at, well, say worse, you know, the retirement risk is greater for the care workers that we have in the organisations. It's just one example there, but then if we move on to also part-time working, so this is looking at we called it the FTE rate, so it's the overall time that people are working per full-time. So on average, this would suggest that people are working just over 4 days a week as an aggregate. And again, we're able to show this by different workforce group. So AHP as a whole, drill down, we can see that it sort of drifts down, dietitians at 74%. But again, it's just an idea to show that there's the number of people that go through the training doesn't relate to the full-time equivalents. So there's a drop off. Moving on to the next one, we have details around agency spend and vacancies. So this one is quite difficult in terms of data quality because it all comes from the financial data rather than the staff in post data. So we've done our best to code things to a role level where we are able to get an insight into some of the spend on agencies and the vacancy rates. So we can see here the orange spots show the vacancy rate against this axis on the right hand side. So the higher the orange spot is, the higher the vacancy rates are, and the blue bars show the numbers of vacancies in terms of FTEs. So again, here with the psychological therapists, there's a high vacancy, a larger number of vacancies, and a very high rate as well. So and then on the data on the right here, we can see how that relates to the agency costs as well. On to the next one. We also have a similar style chart in terms of turnover. So we have the numbers of leavers by workforce group in the blue bars, and then the percentage that relates to in terms of the turnover for the last 12 months. Again, we can drill down into this. So we can see that at role level as well. Again, we've got an extremely high turnover rate for these therapists, but as the blue bar shows you, it's a relatively small pool of workforce. But here we've got OTs, we've got turnover of over 16%, which is still fairly high for such a large workforce group. And then this is this new into version 2, we have something around the reasons for leaving. So for some of the local authorities and the NHS organisations, we have data that is being collected for reasons for leaving. They don't always tell us a huge amount, so resignation, but sometimes there are some areas that we can draw some insights from. And again, it's just to give a flavour of what how powerful this analysis could be if the data is collected as well as possible. Again, we can look at workforce group and so where we've collected it, so looking at resignations for work-life balance, for example, is quite a high percentage for physios. And then on top of that, so particularly this is just within the NHS organisations at the moment, where it gets recorded and where people haven't retired or where they've moved on to another NHS provider or NHS organisation, we've been able to capture that as well. So it's a fairly small sample, it's 345, but we can see there's quite a high percentage that switch between the acute trust and NELFT, and then we've also been able to categorise these organisations to where so 30% have moved to a trust or NHS organisation outside of London, but there's quite a very high proportion that stay within London but outside of BHR. And obviously, you see here at the top we've got BARTS as the organisation that has where the most people have gone to. And then one final slide is around the estimated staffing risk projection. So this is where we have looked at the population dynamics, the population demographics, and how they will look to change over the next 5 years. Where we have it, we've been able to get data from HEE on certain professions. Those are typically in the health professions. Where we haven't been able to get that, we've used a kind of a working age proportion by borough to look at the numbers of potential staff versus the need. And where Elaine mentioned earlier around the high proportion of the high birth rate, we've got a high birth rate and an aging population, so the working age is narrowing. So it looks, unless we can do something to attract more people into the health and social care, there could potentially be problems. And interestingly, there is, from HEE, we have got a healthy pipeline of adult nurses and many of the medical specialties as well. There's a good pipeline across London, but it's some of the other areas where it does look like there needs to be focus, particularly around health visitors and social work, we can see here. But it is estimated, and there's lots of algorithm, there's a calculation that goes into that. So it's to give an idea of where the workforce is at the moment and where it could go to. And that's all I wanted to cover today. This is kind of the tip of the iceberg. As Martin mentioned, there is There is a ton of data in there, and we can look at it in lots and lots of different ways. And it's really great to get feedback from people to see how we can improve this and make it more relevant to the journey that BHR is going on. So at that point, I'll hand back to Ali.
Thank you, Alex. Simon, from your perspective, it would just be really good. We do have a little bit of time to potentially take some questions from the audience and just test out. But before we do, from your perspective as an HRD and our conversations on, creating a flexible and agile workforce, what does this bit of kit do for us in reality?
So I think it is the start of the so what questions, and indeed Elaine was talking about this earlier. So it tells us where our priorities are. So there are some, that the last slide that was up there is clearly indicating that the risk within the risks. We know it's a problem. That's why we're all here. But where do we need to put our finger down now to do some of the now work? And there's some very strong pointers there. I think there is some other interesting things around. I think the work-life balance stands out for me looking at that data. I mean, the thing is, when you're looking at some of the reasons for leaving data, many times people, quite frankly, won't tell the truth. They will tell what they would like to be recorded rather than maybe what their actual reason is. But I think work-life balance certainly stands out for me as probably being a very genuine reason. And I think some of that, just looking at the chat, ties in with things like I can get £50 an hour if I'm taking a more if I can work part-time to keep my pension going, and I can get 50 quid an hour on the agency, then that looks quite an attractive offer, please. So I think there's things around how we look at how we configure our roles, and I think again that's probably an immediate thing that we can do in terms of work-life balance. I think in terms of how we structure the working day, and some of that probably will tie into how we structure the offer of when our clinics are and when our services are delivered anyway, from when our patients actually want them, rather than when they are and when they're told that they can access them. So those would be just my immediate starters to 10, and I can see both Stephen and Carol have some comments. I think Stephen was first off the mark.
Yeah, I just want to respond to the question you asked, Alison, sorry, which is the key question, which is, one of the things we haven't acknowledged, although Chris did reference it, was just the snowy white peaks of the NHS. And for allied health professions, that is particularly a massive issue, where we are more than our nursing and medical colleagues, disproportionately led by white middle class colleagues. And I think this data really points to actually how we could have a longer term vision that is evidence-based for actually how we really address, the issues around equality, diversity and inclusion, which is so key for North East London, given the vibrancy and diversity of our local populations, but also particular to the AHP professions. So that came through really strongly from the toolkit. I can see, I'm just going to reference on your behalf, Alison, colleagues from HCE are on the call as well, who have a real particular focus on AHPs, and I don't know if any of them want to chip in when they're ready, but I'd encourage them to share their views on this as well if they want to.
Thank you, Simon. I'm not quite sure if we got, I think Rachel's left the call actually, so I'm not sure that Rachel Roberts is with us. Is there anybody else from HE on the call that would just like to respond in terms of their perspective, in terms of our approach and the bit of kit that you've worked alongside us closely, so you know everything about it? No? Okay, so I think Carol was the other person with her hand up in terms of a question.
Not so much of a question, Alison, but just a really big thank you for the work on the dashboard. I think it's immensely helpful, and I think particularly in giving some objectivity to some thematic themes that we've spoken about and have been cognizant of. And for me, whilst we are the BHR Academy, I think we absolutely need to use the strength and depth of NEL, because the issues that clearly around movement outside of BHR were within NEL. So there's something around how we collectively perhaps think about strategies together, even if some of the local implementation is slightly variable. And for me, just if we can get something else out of this program of work, we know the problems now. So there are some key AHPs that we've spoken about systemically for some time. But for me, I'm very cognizant that there are issues within orthotics, with podiatry. So some of those future issues that may not be as acute as at the moment, because we don't talk about them so much from a systemic pathway point of view, but they will become more and more important. And I wish that we play all of the AHPs into that systemic flow discussion so that they all have equal weighting in how we think about them all, even if they may not have the numbers of some of the other AHP professions. I think it's a really, really good piece of work, and I'm very grateful for it.
Thank you very much for the endorsement, and great work with Attain. You know, what we would do as a call to action at this particular session, if there's any primary care colleagues on our call today, is just to encourage a greater representation of the data into the model. All the other partners so far have now got their data fully loaded, but we're working closely with primary care, but we would have 100% view on our shop window if we could gather that piece of work. I'd just like to take it, we've got a couple more minutes. Is there any other questions that would like to be raised? I can't see all the hands, so forgive me. Please speak up if you have a question to raise, if it's not already in the chat box. Just to say, we will pick up the questions that come in the chat box and feed those back as evaluation after. So if you have your hand up, please ask your question. Oh, stunned silence. That must have been an old hand.
I'll ask a question if you don't mind, Ali. It's Rosalie from Brisbane.
Yes.
The dashboard, it's absolutely fabulous. I love it. It shows a very clear destination pathway for your leavers to 3 institutions in particular, featuring very strongly. The cheapest strategy is usually to find a way to reduce the leavers. So would not one strategy be to retain the leavers, to have a very deep qualitative study to find what the specific attractants are to those leaver destinations, so that you can package up a fight back strategy?
Simon, would you like to respond to that one? Stephen's got his hand up.
Gosh, I took a sharp intake of breath there, but not least because you're from Brisbane. So thank you for coming along. I don't know what time it is. I think the sharp intake of breath really was about the fight back strategy approach, really. And in North East London, I think while we are aware of the strengths and weaknesses of our respective organisations, I think what we really need is a collaborative strategy which actually recognises how we work across organisations to demonstrate movement as an opportunity for our staff to retain them within the local health and care system. And so it's a slight reframe on what I think you've described, which moves beyond what we have been so entrenched in the NHS for so many years, which is competition with our partners, to more collaboration. If our staff are moving way across to West London or Oxfordshire or Hertfordshire, I might be up for a bit of a fight back strategy, though, I have to say, in terms of actually how we make North East London a place to live and grow up. But yeah, really interesting point around just how we collaborate or compete, I think, really.
Thank you, Stephen. And isn't it amazing that actually our Twitter feed has got all the way to Australia, but actually Australia's got the same challenges with AHP. So thank you for joining us, Rosalie. It must be nearly the middle of the night in Australia, but it's inspiring that actually the appetite and interest on our approach in BHR on collaboration and working together as a system through the academy, using an innovative bit of kit which helps with some of the evidence-based, meaningful conversations, which really allows, you know, a more collaborative conversation, because we're dealing with, you know, an impartial window on our shop. So thank you for that.
Ali, could I just add to that, to Stephen's comment there? I think it's just to build on it. I think, you know, what we've been talking about, and BHR Academy probably represents this more than anything, is the new government, is the current approach to place. And places is important for our staff as it will be for our patients. And I think if we have that place mind in it, that also takes us back to the anchor position, the anchor approach, and engaging with our local population, because that is where our solution lies, is the people who are already living and working within our community. And we are probably collectively, I'm sure we are actually the biggest employer in BHR, almost without a doubt. And if we are harnessing that, then place as a shared approach, I think, will allow us to pull everything together, and it will tie in with the wider strategy.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. That's a very valuable point. Before we move on to the next session, I just want to, there are a few questions that are coming up in the chat. We won't go into the detail of all of those. The essence is more push on student work and BME backgrounds, and, you know, highly diverse student populations. So tapping into some of those, promoting the career pathway. So thank you very much, live audience, for your participation. Stay with us, because we have some interesting analysis to work with you in a poll session. But I'd just like to move on now and welcome some of the facilitation that is needed through the excellent work of the BHR Training Hub, led by Paul Olitan and Dr. Jyoti Sood, who will really share some of their approach in terms of how we're going to support the flow and that integration of that workforce. So Paul, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ali. So thank you. It feels like a really good time to come into the conversation, because I think what I'm going to talk about builds on some of those concepts of collaboration, retention in particular, that Rosalie just mentioned. Ali, can we move on to the next slide? Apologies, I see that Joyce is listed to co-present. I'm sure clinical demands have prevented her from being here. Okay, so just to try and simplify, if we can, the conversation and the approach, and I think the challenges that we face across the workforce, and particularly in the AHP workforce, I think we can kind of break it down to an attraction, recruitment, development, and retention focus. And the attraction piece is very much something that particularly something like a super organisation like the Academy can really bring some attention and focus to, really kind of leading on a campaign to support partners, to communicate to local people in particular, but more broadly, the real benefits and opportunities of starting a career here in the health and care system, and the support that's available to progress and develop that career. And in thinking about recruitment, how do we as a system support employers through a HR function, but also a simplified, more streamlined onboarding approach, and also how do we collectively present a unified voice of BHR through, for example, the upcoming North East London Careers Fair, to really enhance the impacts that the BHR brand and image can affect. But then looking at, this is probably closer to BHR CEPN's realm, that the idea of kind of developing our staff and retaining our staff, and we kind of look at it as an issue of value, and yeah, in terms of how do we support our staff across the board to feel valued, to feel invested in, that there are opportunities for them, and that their well-being, but also their abilities and capabilities are supported and developed and invested in. But then moving into the retention arena, and again responding to the points already raised, supporting staff across the board again to feel that they're making a valuable contribution to our communities, that they themselves have the competence, capabilities and the support to really improve the experience of care across the board. And I think the responses to this is to all of these, it lies in areas of leadership, structures and collaboration. Leadership, obviously, in terms of creating the environment for collaboration, the environment for people to feel safe and to have the permission to work in new and more flexible, responsive ways. Structures to facilitate that, as I've mentioned, issues around kind of onboarding and recruitment, and collaboration across professions, across organisations, and across sectors. Ali, can we have the next slide, please? So I'm just briefly going to take us through. I've just realised, yes, we can have the next slide, Ali. So I've just realised my transitions are going to trip us all up today. So if we just go back, so I just want to take us very briefly through some key points out of here to highlight some of this, and then hopefully on the last slide I'll bring all of this together. So in terms of the attraction, an example of how local partners are collaborating to enhance that voice of BHR and enhance the voice of health and care as a career destination is through the CPN and Care Cities Health and Care Careers Initiative. Care City on our behalf recently held a very successful and impactful 3-day conference for local schools during the half term. And so we're really kind of thankful to all of those children and teachers that participated in that. And it was a real opportunity for them to understand and explore the breadth of roles across health and care that they could use to start their career and continue to build their career. Could I have the next slide, please? Click it twice, I think that'll do. With the recruitment piece, I've alluded to this already, the structures that need to be in place, and we're already seeing some really exciting work across BHR, UT and NELFT around flexible contracts and job descriptions to support staff to be able to move flexibly across the organisational boundaries to respond to where need is presented the most. And the CPN's emerging digital training hubs, digital passports, should hopefully enable staff and employers to again move across those roles through more streamlined onboarding. Next slide, please. And then in terms of the development, there's a collaboration piece, and we do through the CPN. We're doing some work with Kate Waterton at NELFT around the trends piece, which is an online peer support, collaborative development environment space for allied health professionals, particularly in the MSK arena, to bring them together to not just in primary care networks, but also bringing in resources and input and experience from across the system to help embed and develop those AHP roles, particularly in the primary care environment, and then enablement champions, which are an example of a collaboration again between Care City and the CPN and training providers to build on the collaborations that exist already between our workforce roles, and start to support an innovative development opportunity for senior care home staff to build on the experiences and the activities that they're seeing delivered by the clinical AHP roles, and to reduce the impact or the demand on those clinical roles by delivering those activities within the care home environment. Can we have the next slide, please? Next slide. And then finally on this bit, building on that idea of retention and how retention really lies in the way in which people feel valued and valuable. Do they feel that they're able to contribute to the development and emergence of more responsive and improved experiences of care? And so through the work that we're doing, really starting to introduce a knowledge and learning culture to enhance that view of collaboration, building on opportunities to bring people together to learn collaboratively, to share their knowledge, their experience, their aspirations and their challenges, and find common solutions between themselves for those. But then to build on that, to move to a more focused, progressive approach to improvement, building on a quality improvement approach, and utilising mechanisms such as communities of practice, interprofessional group supervision and collaborative practice improvement workshops to support people to come together to improve the delivery of care and the experience of care amongst our communities. So I'm just going to go on to the final slide for this piece. One more clip, and just use this as an opportunity to vision how some of these elements might piece together for someone who's starting out on their career, and how the system can support them to start that career, develop it and establish their career within the BHR health and care environment. So starting out, our imaginary local young person may come across a media campaign led by BHR Academy and partners that really start to promote and establish the benefits and opportunities that BHR presents as a place to start and develop a career. Our young person takes up a position supported through perhaps Kickstart, or again the Health and Care Careers project through Care City and the CEPN, to undertake a role as a care home administrator. Finding that BHR is a very supportive and progressive environment, they undertake a level 2 apprenticeship opportunity to become an adult care worker within their care home. And then as part of an emerging progressive primary care network, which is moving beyond the realms of a focus on general practice and starting to encompass the range of different opportunities and resources within that neighbourhood, encompassing care homes and other providers, our care worker is engaged in collaborative learning opportunities, collaborative learning networks across the PCN care homes, bringing them into contact with a multidisciplinary environment where they can again share knowledge, share learning and experience. And then rapidly moving forward through a few years and a few development opportunities and roles within the care home environment, our care worker has the opportunity to develop into a senior care worker, work alongside allied health professionals in a clinical capacity, and through a level 4 apprenticeship, take on some of those roles that the allied health professional will be delivering to the care home, and become an enablement champion, which is as I said, an innovative approach being led by Care City and the CEPN alongside training providers to build on the existing collaborations that exist within or between our elements of the workforce, and that enablement champion representing a collaboration and a progressive role in terms of development, and utilising the digital training hub's digital passport facility to move between placements and roles within the local system. And then building on the collaborative element that role, that enablement champion offers, and the experience and the interaction with the allied health professional workforce, our enablement champion could perhaps have the opportunity to undertake either a 3-year degree course or a 4-year apprenticeship program to become a fully qualified allied health professional themselves, and then utilising the flexible contracts and JDs that BHR, UT and NELFT are already developing, using those in their new role to move flexibly across organisational and sector boundaries to respond to the demands of care as they ebb and flow through the system, and then feeling really confident about the role they play and the value they bring to the local community, and through support through the CPN's multidisciplinary faculty, which is currently emerging. They take on a leadership role and start to support broader groupings and collaborations of the workforce in a multidisciplinary context, to lead them through knowledge and learning opportunities through collaborative learning groups, collaborative improvement networks, really starting to utilise the opportunities of communities of practice, collaborative improvement networks and the like, to start to support the local workforce to improve the experiences of care. So that's just an example, quite a high-level example of how some of the opportunities and activities currently emerging within the system can come together to support local people into established careers.
Thank you, Paul. That's really inspiring, and as always, thank you also to Care City, who are on the call and in our virtual conference today, for all the work that's generated in that collaboration, and to our system partners in terms of BHR, UT and NELFT, in terms of looking at how we start to really unlock some of that flow and flexibility around our demographics and system partners across BHR. Thank you, Paul. It was really valuable. I'm going to move us on now. It's great also to see quite a lot of networking going on in the chat. So it's really good that people are using this opportunity to broker new relationships and meetings and way forward. So if anything, the Academy is offering a great facilitation today to people with like-minded conversations that can take some of the actions away today. Today is an action learning set. We will need to agree some actions. We wanted to just test out, we're going to do a little bit of a group activity now. So you've heard quite a lot of detail today. And so what would help was just to capture some of this in terms of helping us with an ability to sort of evaluate what we find the most helpful. And so I'm going to bring in my expert comms and engagement lead, Ben Tunstall, who's going to lead us through a series of questions where you as the audience can participate in an active live poll, and we'll see what we test out with some of the action learning, what's been the most valuable and what you'd like more of. So Ben, just over to you in terms of the group think tank session that we're going to lead now.
Hello, thank you, Ali. Hello, everybody. I'm about to launch a poll, which you'll see in the chat template. It's 4 quick questions, and then I'll launch another one where we have another 2 quick questions as well. So please, when you see it, just click on and answer the questions for us. Won't take long. It'll take maybe maximum a minute. Okay, I'm launching it now. Great. If people could start answering the questions for me, that would be brilliant. The poll is now live.
No pressure. Ask the audience. Are you able to just read the questions out whilst they're formulating then?
Yeah. The first question is, are AHP workforce groups a top priority in your organisation? Would an increased level of AHP resource support careers in young people locally across BHR? Will care out of hospital be improved by increasing entry-level career opportunities? And can data-led, evidence-based information improve health and wellbeing outcomes in our local communities?
Does it actually give us a live scores on the doors?
It should, yeah. We're up 23 completions. Yeah, well, at the end, I'll just view the results of the first poll. So
if we say view all results, does that give us?
It should,
okay.
Yeah. But we should wait till people complete it, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so slightly lower response on the second question. Oh no, sorry. So we've got a yes and a no response. Okay, so it's split the result.
$36 completions.
How many people have we got on the call left now, Ben? It looks it's about 55.
Yep.
Okay. So
No, more than that. Because there's 12 people. So it's 67. So 39 completions.
Just trying to gauge how responsive people are. In
40 completions.
Okay.
I mean, I could play some elevator. I'll play some elevator music, but that might.
And so, are we able to now load? Do we need to wait for a full response before we can move on to the other questions?
I don't think so. Let's see if I can launch another poll. I could see if I can launch the second one. Okay, I'm launching the second one now. This one's multiple choice. It's more about feedback on the dashboard. People can move to that second poll once they finish the first. We have 48 completions on the first poll. I can view results when it stops. When the completions stop, I'll hit view results. Okay, it looks like we've hit 48 completions. So for the first question, in the first poll, are AHP workforce groups a top priority in the organisation? 67% said yes, 32% said no.
So I suppose my question is, for the people that said no, any recommendations of what we could do better would be valuable. So please pop those in the chat. Feel free to contribute. This is an evolutionary and organic dashboard technology and the questions. So the Academy needs to learn in a continuous improvement methodology to keep shaping. So please do contribute your questions. Have we got the answers for the other questions?
So for the second question, would an increased level of AHP resource support careers and young people locally across BHR? 100% of people said yes.
Okay, so that's good. We're all on the same page.
For the third questions, will care out of hospital be improved by increasing entry-level career opportunities? 95% of people said yes, and only 4% said no.
Thank you. I'd be interested in the 4% on your feedback in terms of why that is. So please feel free to contribute to the conversation.
Yeah. And for the last question, can data-led evidence-based information improve health and wellbeing outcomes in our local communities? We had 100% of people say yes.
So I'm just going to reflect on a conversation. So Joe, you've raised the question of read the dashboard. I'd be interested to know how we can access data and also how we might add data to the independent social care workforce. That's a bit of a techie question. I don't know if we've got Alan on the call here today from BHRUT. It's just there is some, or it might even be Martin, in terms of the skills for care data, because I think we covered that in your presentation. But the skills for care data is a sort of special case, isn't it, Martin? I'm just pointing the question back to you as a response.
Yes, it is. But I think something we probably could have covered, Ali, is just explaining access to the data. because we are going to ensure that to a certain level, where it's publicly available information, people can access it. And then deeper dives, Ali, you'll be essentially managing through the academy. Yes,
that's right. Thank you, Martin. So yeah, we are aware of the need to integrate the systems, and this is all work in progress. Given that the birth of this model only happened in August, we're doing really well given it's only November. But that continued conversation and support to ensure that actually the richness of the data and then the access right, so that we embed this model into operational practices, whether that be in designing apprenticeships, working with our education partners to design a volume of education and training, or whether or not it's about business case development, etc., for transformation boards, etc., to really think through bolting in workforce planning at the front end of those processes rather than at the end of those care pathway reviews is important. So our first phase was to get proof of concept. Our second phase is to embed the model into operational organisations so that they themselves can use the data and the insights. There are a range of levels of views to restrict, the academy holds the overall overarching whole system picture, but we are increasingly working to ensure that actually as much richness of the detail can be plugged in. And another element that we've worked hard with the HRDs on the call today is to bolt in the digital passport. So we're starting to map that in. We'd also like to include, the JSNA. We'd like, there's a lot of other information that can really provide a holistic, population-based demographic tool. So this is the start of a very exciting journey, and congratulations to BHR for being the first in the country to get it off the ground. Well done. All right, I'm going to keep us to time because we do need to talk about so what and what are the next steps. And I'm going to invite Alan initially from BHRUT to contribute to everything we've heard and to follow on from the conversation that Simon already alluded to at the front end of the dashboard development demo. So Alan, from your perspective from BHRUT and the place, I suppose, element of that, it'd be really good to hear from your perspective the so what.
Thank you. Just to introduce myself, I'm Alan Wishart, the Interim Director of Workforce at BHRUT, working closely with Simon across at Nelft. I think we've done the easy part, haven't we? That's a joke, by the way, in the sense of gathering all this data and whatever. I think what we've heard today really is the so what's quite obvious, isn't it? I think the presentation from Elaine, particularly giving the messages about what we need to do within the patch to make sure that we increase our AHP capacity and work together. I think for me, having listened to the presentations today, it's so how is the piece now I think we need to be working through, which I don't think we've got the answers yet, but certainly the discussions that we've had and discussions elsewhere really is that the time is right, certainly, to do this. The sort of political environment around collaboration is being pushed, and again, rightly so. So I think in the so what is that we've actually got a good set of principles for us to start this work. And I think that it is quite complex, and this is going to be quite challenging. The concept of recruiting AHPs and getting AHPs into the organisation, we think is going to be quite simple, but I think it's new challenges for us. Certainly from an NHS perspective, working with local authorities and others is a new thing for us. So pulling that together is going to be quite challenging, but a good opportunity. So that's the bit that we've really got to work through. Again, in a meeting this morning, we were talking about different remuneration aspects that we have in various organisations and the different worlds that we're in. So it's things like that we need to work through. But certainly, as I say, the groundwork's been done. we know where the areas are that we need to identify and work on, but it's now sitting down with people that's been on this this call today to say, how can we do this, and how do we do it simplistically in a way that doesn't lengthen or delay some of these processes. So that's what we need to get our heads around next, is about how we can do that. But certainly, again, when I speak across London with other HR colleagues, they're very much aware of the academy. We are ahead of the game. So I think it's London and others are watching us about how we can deliver to some of this. So I think I'll just leave it with the fact is that, so what is we need to sort of deliver something out of this now, which I'm pretty sure we will do with everyone's contributions. So just to say thank you very much. It's been really interesting.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Simon, is there anything in terms of your perspective you'd like to add as an aid memoir to what you already said earlier?
I think it's just to go back and reflect. I mean, I agree with everything that Alan has said, but I think it's just to reflect on that those two streams of immediacy to deal with where we are now. But I think a lot of that is around retention and immediate career development, and then that future long-term approach, which is both on how we engage with the future workforce, but also how we project our don't just replicate the roles that we have now, and try and use the crystal ball to understand the delivery and shape of what care need will be and where AHPs fit into that in not just 5 years hence, but possibly even 10 or 20 years hence, since we're looking for a career pathway for people who haven't even done their GCSEs potentially at this point.
Thank you, Alan. I suppose from my perspective at the Academy, I mean, you know, for me, the issue is about flow and creating a flexible and agile workforce. We're talking about it here. For me, about if we're going to meet some of the demand that Elaine has alluded to, and certainly some of my conversations with the LMC yesterday and with some of the clinical chairs in the primary care sector, you know, the tsunami of demand does not allow us the wealth to sit around and wait and talk about this for another 4 years. You know, it is about an immediacy and getting real gravitas now that we've done the fundamentals in putting in place the robust foundations and building blocks to work together, to Paul's point, particularly about collaboration. I'm a natural collaborator. Anybody who knows me well. I'm a natural collaborator, and for me, the opportunity of the Academy and its approach, you know, leads the country in terms of ICS opportunities. And yes, we know that there is a call to action to grow at pace 50,000 nurses. We know that. And that will come as a natural pipeline. You know, we do quite well with the great work that Catherine and Kenya have done in terms of really growing our own workforce from basic English right through to registered nurses. But the AHP side of things is a post-pandemic golden thread that we must not lose. And that's why this particular workshop, we will do many others on, you know, nurse apprenticeships, etc. But today, because of the tsunami of demand out of hospital and in our care sectors and primary care settings, the pace has to be, you know, front foot. Anybody who knows me, I work quite quickly, and I'll be pushing the system quite hard to move us along to, you know, what are we going to do next? If we always do what we've always done, we're always going to get what we always got. You know, this cannot be a repeat of anything we've done before. We've got far greater collaboration relationships. We've got far better digital technology, and we just really want to harness that energy, given the huge competing agendas each of you carry in your respective organisations. But this largely today is a call to action. So this is a lovely conversation, but it mustn't just be a conversation. It needs to follow through with real gravitas on an operational delivery plan that together in partnership we work at a system level to make real change for the benefits of our communities. So I'm just going to call on Elaine, just in terms of everything that Elaine has heard, just to do some closing remarks. Really, those have been mine. Joe would be reflecting his passion for, you know, our young people in our communities and the local well-being of our residents. But Elaine, from your perspective, the added value is important for us to really act and do after this session. So it'd just be good to hear from you as a final snapshot.
Thanks, Alison, and my pleasure. And just to say thank you to you and all the presenters today for not only the session, but the work getting to this session. And I suppose just sort of building on others' closing remarks, I think there is a shared sense of the scale of the challenge. And I think we're all very accepting that there's both an immediate and long term, and as well as getting the basics right, through to transformation. And I would support Alan's view of the so how being our next challenge, as well as the fit for purpose workforce that we need, not only for now, but in the future. But I do think today has really showcased, you know, the strength of the system, the strength of the relationships that we've already established in quite a short time, and also the passion, commitment, opportunities and innovation that we can bring together and work together to deliver what we need for children, young people and adults, families, residents, vulnerable adults, you know, everyone in our community across BHR. And I suppose the only thing I would say is, if we can't do it, nobody can. So good luck. And I look forward to working with you all over the coming weeks and months.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you all to all of our presenters today. I hope you found that a valuable session. We have recorded it. It will be uploaded to YouTube, so any of your wider organisation representatives who couldn't be with us today will be able to tap into that. The content in terms of the slide deck and the resources will come out as resources to you after, and we'll do a full evaluation, and then we'll look to the steering group to really think through about how we manage the so what and the so how, and work together to really make this a meaningful activity. We hope to bring everybody together again. Another date for another action learning set will arrive very soon at the end of January, so they're probably the last Wednesday in January. But for now, thank you all for your contributions and have a great day. Thank you.